What's up, everybody? This is Tasha Ray, and we are Team Diverse City, back again with another segment of Unpopular Opinion. Today, we're going to let Derrick kick off our topic for today. What's up, Derrick?
What you got, Derrick?
Hi. So today I want to talk about assuming good intent in the workplace, because all intentions are not always good. And certain groups of people experience bad intentions more often than others and for different reasons. So when companies tell their employees that everyone should just assume good intent all the time, it erases marginalized people and our experiences, and it also silences us and or removes our voice when it comes to bringing these things up, right? Like if you're experiencing racism in the workplace, you're not gonna assume good intent on that one. And oftentimes these things, because isms are so, and bias is just so insidiously pervasive, so unconscious, some people, some aggressors will just not know that they're putting out some bad intentions, and they need to be told about themselves. And these issues need to be addressed. So assuming good intention, okay, to a degree, but we need to take it very seriously when someone brings up the fact that those intentions were not very good at all. I'd love to open it up.
Yes, I totally agree. I think we were talking about how I have been telling people, I understand that you want to have intent versus impact, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So, to hell with your intent. What's important is your impact, and only that, and so if you are in a space where you're hyper-focusing on your intention, then that means you're trying to center yourself and your ego in a situation where harm is being done. And I mean, when I'm saying it like that, hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down around why that is a problem, what Derrick is putting down, how it is invisibilizing and silencing the people who are being harmed. Because I will tell you, I have had it where, I will just keep it real. My godmom was a white woman. She knew my mom since the time that they were 13 years old. When Trump was elected, she disowned me because of the work that I do.
Whoa.
Yeah. Now her intent was probably not to disown her Black godchild, but that was the impact. And so it doesn't even matter if she comes back and she apologizes. Now in the workplace, there has been people who are like, oh, but I didn't mean for that to happen. That wasn't my intention. Yeah, well now, now I have a reprimand, or now I have a write-up, or now I'm fired because you went off and did something, especially at the intersection of being like Black and Indigenous and disabled and a person size and femme and queer and all these things. So at the end of the day, if you need to center yourself, then you also need to go and do that away from people until you can either disrupt your harm completely, or you can reduce your harm as much as possible while you work on yourself.
And I'm going to get close to the camera and say this so y'all can see my mouth, the words that are coming out of my mouth. Nobody gives a shit about your intent anymore, right? It's like, and intent, what has happened is that intent has become weaponized to a point where it overshadows the outcome. And our problem is that no matter what your intentions are, if they're harming us, we no longer care why you did it, right? Because now we have to fix your mistake. And sometimes not a mistake, your intentionality in harming populations that you don't identify with. So it's like, for example, if you think about policies that have been put into place, I'll go back to No Child Left Behind. Remember when Nickelby came into play, and even Obama's race to the top, to be very fair. And they're like, oh, we're going to reward schools for doing really well, and the schools that are not, we're going to punish them. That'll make schools try harder. Our intent is that no child gets left behind in our educational system. And what happened? Children
left behind.
That's right. The children that got left behind look like everybody on this damn call, right? And other marginalized populations and invisible diversities like people, children living with disabilities. It was like, and then you cut funding to inner city schools. or schools that already had issues with resources because you reinforced a process that already promoted racial bias in our educational system, that promoted a number of different biases in our educational system. So while your intent was to improve education, yeah, you did that for some, the people who are already doing really well and receiving the rewards, while not addressing the systemic oppression that was happening and does still happen in our educational institutions. At that point, we didn't give a shit about your intent anymore. What we cared about is the fact that our children were failing and being punished because they were being taught based on a culturally biased standardized test. And that wasn't fair. That's a prime example of intent versus impact and outcome. And people who talk about good intent, I sometimes look at them and just, and I'm trying to, what's the word, filter a little bit, but I just visualize them and flames coming up behind them like, okay, turn around and walk straight into hell with your good intentions, right? Because it's just it's an overshadowing of discrimination and oppression. And let me be clear, those two things are different. And if you don't know what that means, look it up. Because I'm not going to do the work for you on that today because we on a different topic.
So I wanted to add that something I always say is I'm 100% responsible for 100% of my communication 100% of the time. The message that I need to get from in here out there, I need to make sure it lands the way that I intended. And I need to make sure I ask clarifying questions to make sure that it does. And if the impact is different from what I intended, it's my responsibility to clear that up and to fix that. So when we go back to assuming good intent, that automatically just at the knees cuts off any mindful or intentional work like that.
And also to add to that too, and the conversations that you were having is this is also true in terms of like things that you don't expect, like policy. Like this next weekend is the 30th anniversary of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? And so this was something that was supposed to bring parity because disabled folks were left out of the Civil Rights Act. People who had the access here, because foreshadowing, access to the legal structures to be able to make case law, to be able to make the precedent, to put the ADA in place. You know, that was 30 years ago. That was 1990. In the early 2000s, disability justice came about as a framework because they realized that they weren't actually getting equity and parity. So a big argument, especially in the pandemic, is, well, it was, the impact of the ADA wasn't the intention of the original people who fought for it. Well, I'm not saying that. That's not the point. The point is not whether or not people intended for the ADA to fall short of what it needed to do to bring equity and equality to all disabled folks, not just the disabled white folks with privilege and access to policies and systems. So it's important to also look at this in terms of like organizational policies and procedures as well, or even just the policies and procedures we have in our municipal governments or state governments or federal governments. When we're talking about these things and we're like, oh, well, we have these laws in place, even though the impact isn't good, well, then that means the policy isn't good. It doesn't matter what the intent of the policymaker is, or the policy, or what the history is, or how you've always done things. What it matters is the output of that. And are people being harmed? And if they are, then something has to change.
Well, I think one of the biggest problems with intent is that people who have these intentions, particularly only impacting those that are privileged, right? They're reinforced for their behavior. So they're going to keep creating these policies in their systems for certain people to just be privileged, just like what Cheryl was talking about with the No Child Left Behind. It only really worked for a certain group of people and it didn't for the rest. But there wasn't really a huge slap on the wrist. Right. Or there was just a little slap on the wrist, right? There wasn't anything huge that happened. And so when people come and say, oh, I didn't mean that, or I didn't mean to do that, that wasn't my intent. When they go in like that, people often will say, oh, I know you didn't mean that. But then they're reinforced for like doing it again, right? Mm-hmm. They're not told that you can't say something or do something, right, without actually doing it and meaning it, right, for all groups, for all different type of people. So I think the problem is that they're just reinforced to keep doing it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It just, it's almost like the word intent has become triggering when I hear people say it. I'm like, are you kidding me? What do you mean that wasn't your intention? Can we just not overshadow the outcome and think about the repercussions of it, because even when you look at our justice system, that shit doesn't fly, especially if you are Black and someone says that even the intention changed the outcome. We don't get a pass if and when that happens, right? And so if you think about equity, I agree with you, Jenna, and you brought up a good point that I didn't even think about is what's the punishment for people who have terrible outcomes based on their intent? Most of the time, especially in large corporations, that doesn't happen, or it's a slap on the wrist, or a conversation is going to be had with you. And it's like, that's not enough. We need to see a little bit more. The harm, the return and the punishment should match the harm in some way, shape, or form.
I've been using the word integrity with this. That I think is really important. Of like, who exactly is it that you are? Who is it that you think you are? And how does your actions and behaviors and policies actually fit into that and create synergy? Because I've asked people like, oh, you want to be an anti-racist organization, right? So that would assume that all the people within your anti-racist organization should be anti-racists. Are you willing to have a person in your organization who's not an anti-racist? What does that look like if someone has shown themselves either implicitly or explicitly, consciously or unconsciously, to not only not be an anti-racist or even non-racist, but to not even care about the lifelong journey that it takes to actively be anti-racist? Does that person still have a job there? And if so, to what extent? Because these are the conversations you need to have around intent versus impact. If a person is having a negative impact, if they're causing toxicity in the workplace, if they're disrupting things, if you're having an exodus of employees with marginalized, oppressed, or exploited lived experiences or identities, you need to make a decision about how is your organization going to have integrity to these sort of, talking about the equity statements again. The equity statements that you have, both the ones that are reactive and the ones that are supposed to be the foundations, your mission statements, your value statements, your strategic plans, your DEI initiatives. If you have people in your organization or your organization itself does not have integrity with the things that you're putting out into the world, then that has a lot more to say about the extent to which you have to do some work around this before you can even talk about whether or not it was your intention. Because you're not even, if you can't even hold your own impact for yourself, you can even hold yourself accountable to impact, then how in the heck are you going to be able to sit out here and act like you have anything to talk about in terms of whether or not you had intention of that or not? Your intention was shown in your lack of accountability and preparedness for the situation.
That's right. How you going to help somebody else if you can't hold yourself accountable? That's going to be a t-shirt, Tasha. That's a shirt.
This is down. I'm writing it down. How I rewind it.
All right. Last minute thoughts before we wrap up this version of Unpopular Opinion.
Yes. Arrest all the killers of Breonna Taylor.
Boom. Come on. Impact versus intent.
Hey.
Too damn long. We here for it. And if it happens before we air this, thank you. And if it doesn't, we on your ass.
There it is.
Yes.
All right. Well,
I would like to ask.
Go ahead. What'd you say, ChrisTiana?
I would like to ask folks to do at least 3 things that is moving from this, collecting all of this knowledge, all those anti-racist books that I know that you paid a whole bunch of money on Amazon to buy. Actually take those books and put at least 3 of those topics or concepts into practice. At least 3. Take the risk. Put it into practice. Learn from those mistakes.
Facts. We have a whole anti-racist library available online, but I think that people are talking so much about anti-racism, you don't really know what it means. It just sounds good in theory, but when you understand the work that it's going to take to build an anti-racist society, you better be here for it and then prepare future generations for it, because it's going to take all of us to undo it, right? You don't undo thousands of years of systemic oppression just by reading a book. So get with the program. All right. Thank y'all. This has been another Unpopular Opinion. Make sure that you like and subscribe to Diverse City. I'm pressing down so you can see the buttons. Y'all keep in contact with us. We are very grateful for your time and your follows. We appreciate you, and we'll be bringing you more content. So like and share our videos with your friends and support, and give us comments on what you'd like to see us talk about as far as unpopular opinion related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we look forward to bringing y'all more content. Thank you. We appreciate you. Have a blessed day.